How you doing, guys? Hi, Caesar. Hi, Rustum. How you guys? Sound and video working okay today? Okie doke. What I wanted to talk about, let me see where I put that. Here we go. What I wanted to talk about today, I was wondering about it, is that when there's a takeover, when a oh great, thanks, Caesar. Um, when there's a video takeover, uh, when a watch company is taken over, either in part or in whole, what are the consequences? In other words, are can there be really good consequences? Now, there are a lot of different takeovers, and you have the what are they called? The Richemont Group that's taken over. Boy, so many top luxury companies like Restaurant Constantin, Jaeger-LeCoultre, um, who else? Well, a whole bunch of other ones. And um, one of the things they established something called Val Fluier, which makes watch movements. And the watch movements can be used by different companies that are that are owned by the Richemont Group. Now, more recently, the I don't know if it's more recently or not, but seems to be anyway. Companies that are taking over, some I think improve it, others don't, and I don't want to talk about too much the ones who don't, but there are some of those too. What I want to take a look at today, let's take a look at uh, LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Maurice Hennessy, or something like that. That's the other part of the LVMH, and talk about the possible good things that can come out of it. Also, too, I'd like to take a look at what Chanel up to, and here you have this luxury brand, best known for Chanel Number 5 and Coco Chanel, but it's these companies have are such big takeovers. It's like everything. Hey neighbor, how you doing? Goldfinger, good to see you. Lazard, um, might be good for keeping independence in business, but for the mate, that is a good point. Hi James. Uh, Tim G, I see you're up. Must be 5 o'clock somewhere. Rustem, in case of Richemont taking over good companies, I'm not sure it turns good too well. For example, IWC sucks now. I think I, I don't know. IWC has been, I don't know whether this is Richemont thing or not. I've always been a little dubious about IWC. Maybe it is Richemont's fault. Who knows? I imagine that the whole what are the geophysic line of watches that were used to be part of Jaeger-LeCoultre are now gone. And so, what's going on? Hi, Oscar. John, good to see you. Hey, Dom. Okay, let's take a look at LVMH real quick and sort of like, what is this? Chanel buys MBNF. Yeah, I want that that they've done. The question, I guess, is yeah, there's a lot of these ownerships, and mainly they solve financial problems. But other times, like I'm still not happy with the fact that how Marco Lang was pushed out of his own company. That kind of stuff sort of bothers me because when I look at Lang and Hein right now, I don't see anything new. There's not a single new movement they've had, and I think this was back in 2018 when it's been a while now, and I guess the UWD 33.2 would be new. There's sort of a central second on the UWD 33.1, but I don't know. Anyway, let's take a look at Louis Vuitton real quick because I'll explain why in a second. Let's open that guy up. Flip the window. And here we go. Okay. LVMH, Louis Vuitton, when you think of, well, if you think of it at all, with Louis Vuitton, usually you think of maybe ladies' handbags. My wife has a Louis Vuitton handbag we got in New York. And, well, we also happen to have an LVMH watch, that world timer that my wife has. But I don't know. A lot of people think, well, they're not really serious about watchmaking, but they are. In 2011, they bought La Fabrique du Temps. Now it's called La Fabrique du Temps Louis Vuitton. It used to be just La Fabrique du Temps. And there are a couple guys who were top watchmakers who were in that. And so they have their own movement company now. And they can, as far as I know, they're making movements primarily for LVMH labeled watches. But when we look at the number of watch companies that LVMH owns, that we typically know about, like Zenith, Daniel Roth, which is actually one of their newer acquisitions, well, it's not a newer one. They own Bulgari had bought the Daniel Roth name, and LVMH owns Bulgari, so you know who's the boss of that one. They also own Hublot and Tag Heuer. Now, of those, any one of them, you say, well, none of these are exactly high horology. Chaumet, I think, has dropped all men's watches. They're the maker of the Dandy. But to give you an idea of the kind of clout that even a company like Chaumet has, Chaumet was a company that was chosen in the Paris Olympics to make the medals, and they made it out of. They have these. I think they're gold-plated, brass or bronze or silver-plated medals, and the inside of them were pieces of the Eiffel Tower. When they did some kind of renovation of the Eiffel Tower some years ago, they saved these things. Thing with Daniel Roth is to me very interesting because Roth was in big trouble, I think. Well, see, Roth was with, and this goes back to Chaumet, the Chaumet brothers who owned Chaumet at the time were the ones that saved, really, Breguet from almost near oblivion. When the Chaumet brothers took over, they were able to, they brought in Daniel Roth to take these, these sort of, I think they were either divers or military style. They had a couple models that they had at the time. And then they sort of brought back the quote unquote glory of Abraham Louis Breguet. That was pretty much done by the work of Daniel Roth. Somebody else who did a little work for him turned out to be and also actually made one of their watches was Michel Parmigiani. Anyway, so here you have these things. Now, when you look at all of these other things that LVMH owns, what you're really seeing is you're seeing an incredible amount of wealth. And as we all know, these things cost money. So there's it's sort of an interesting thing. Here they have lots and lots of money. Now, somebody mentioned that Chanel bought a piece of the MB&H. I don't know how much of MB&H I don't know how much MB&H needed the money, or they just, it was sort of like, oh boy, suddenly we have all of this dough available. I know I have on my FP Journe, they bought, I think, what, 20-25% of FP Journe, and they bought a whole lot of other watch companies too, including Bell and Ross, which was a big surprise, a hunk of Romain Gauthier. They own a piece of Kinnessy, which makes the movements for Tudor, and plus a special 12.1 and 12.21 for the J12 line that Chanel has. Okay, so let me throw out that question. This is one, by the way, too. The guy who's the head of Louis Vuitton, he rose to the richest man in the world when Elon Musk somehow lost a bunch of money in some deal he made when he bought Twitter. But I mean, these guys are like seriously wealthy, and these companies have a huge amount of money. I would say probably more so than Swatch or Richemont. In fact, almost definitely more so. And then you have companies like Chanel too. Chanel is super rich, and again, you have money from luxury sources, but to many, the kind of watches that we collect are luxury items. Okay, I just wanted to sort of to bring that to the fore. And then let's see what you have. Everyone always says, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okay. Oh, let's see where we're going. Tim, LGMH new dress watches. Tim, I know you like to try them on every now and then. That's okay. I'm not judging. Good morning, Oscar. Okay, let's see what you got here. Yeah, Tim pointed out that Chanel bought MB&F. I was surprised. Did they buy the whole thing or just a certain percentage of it? Usually what they seem to do is they buy enough so that if they need something from them, they sort of go to the front of the line. I know that H. Moser at Compagnie bought a hunk of Agenor, who we're working with, and I don't know where we are in line as far as that's concerned. Very unfortunate when the innovator is forced out. Yeah, I think something where you have something like, you got sort of two things. On the one hand, you lose an innovator, but then you have someone who knows how to run a business. A lot of times, some of the really bright lights, as far as watchmakers are concerned, don't know jack about business. I've seen that not only in watchmaking, but I've seen it in especially in software development. These guys who I've known who are really good developers who make this great software, then they decide they're going to start their own company, and sooner or later they get bought out. And a lot of times they complain that they get forced out of the company. Well, the reason they're forced out of the company is that they bought it for their software, not for their business talents. Same thing in watchmaking, I think. You got some guys who just aren't very good at business, and you need somebody who's good at business to make the watches that we collect. I don't know. Some of them are good. I think FP Jorn is pretty savvy businessman of the ones we've looked at. AHRM, it can help but also damage some brands. Longines, for example, when they bought up by Swatch, they lost all their movement manufacturing facilities. Now they just use slightly modified ETA. Yeah, there's that. I I don't know when they were bought by Swatch. The one I have one of theirs from 1989 with their EOS. I think it's fantastic watch. So whether that was before or after the Swatch started buying everybody up, I'm not sure. Hello, Rancher. How you doing, man? Russo, we should support independent watchmakers. I'm not talking about Rolex. But rather Thomas Niches or Dornbluth, even Ulysse Nardin and Girard-Perregaux. Um, I as far as I support independence. In fact, I'm a member of the AHCI Friends, which means I think they charge $100 a year for nothing. So now you know you're a friend. Um, yeah, but I sort of any company that makes a really good watch, whether they're an independent or not. I mean, like I like Vacheron Constantin 10 a whole lot. Uh, to the extent that Richemont puts the brakes on any creativity, I naturally I wouldn't, but otherwise I do. I think independent in and of itself it isn't necessarily a good or bad thing. I think how they how they do things in the long run is what's important. Hi, Watch Nichols. Killer audio file. Look at the time. I'm in PST and I've yet to sleep. What is miles to go and before you sleep? A lot of acquisitions lately, but nothing new came out of them. Example, Universal Geneve, ETA seems to be running out of steam. Only independent watchmakers involved. Dominic, LVMH has such a group prestigious brands. Any sub-quality offerings would be very unwise. Dominic, that's a good point. That's a very good point. I see the same thing with Chanel. I see Chanel going in the opposite direction of a lot of companies. They bought Bell and Ross, I think back in 2011. I'm not positive about the date, but something like that. And I was looking at Bell and Ross, and I have the things I always liked about Bell and Ross is that they had watches that looked like the instrument panel on my airplane, and so I thought that was really cool. And the but I mean, when you open up Bell and Ross, you find an ETA. Now there's a whole new line of Bell and Ross watches, and this is where it may be a mistake. In fact, it may be just dumb, really dumb, what Chanel has done with Bell and Ross in terms of having a high horology brands. So you look at the high horology parts of Bell and Ross, and you've got tourbillons, you've got all of these things that are made at the facility that Chanel has in La Chaux de France. And not the one in Le Loc, which is the Kinesi, but another one. They own part of one and the whole other of Chanel manufacturing. So what they're pumping into Bell and Ross is something Bell and Ross, as far as I know, has never had. That is seriously good movements. Now, I mean, if they're going to charge $100,000 for a Bell and Ross because they put in this, really wonderful movement, I don't think that's a good idea. But on the other hand, if they could bring them up a little with something more like the kind of level of movement they have in the J12, which is, even though it's based on a Tudor, it's pretty nice movement. Yeah, so I agree with Dominic. These guys, that's the last thing they want to do is, I mean, look at the companies that again, going back to Chanel, the ones they bought. They just bought MB&F. They have shares in Romain Gaultier. They have shares in FP Journe, and they're probably some. Well, they own, I think, flat out Bell and Ross, but that's not a prestige brand. I mean, but it is a well-known watch brand. But they don't want to, they don't want to buy some junk brand. I know that. Uh, the Partners Group, private equity owned by Breitling and wait, UG. Who is UG? It's not. What's I don't know what UG is. James, the guy running LVMH is known as a wolf in Cashmere. Oh, really? That is, it sounds like instead of the wolf in sheepskin, the wolf in Cashmere. Cashmere comes from my goats who live next door. They bought 25% of MB&F. Thanks, Tim. Good morning. Good morning. How you doing? How's your dog there, Brian? Yeah, we wear the mask. Yeah, it's La Fabrique du Temp is what, or Fabrique du Futon. Hey, wise guy. HRM. Those Bell and Ross models might become a good deal someday. The brand isn't super popular and certainly not known for high horology. No, they're not. But take a look at some of their. Go to the site and take a look at that. They are amazing. By the way, this is something I ran across yesterday that I just was really freaked me out. I went to the new Marco Lang. Okay, now Marco Lang got forced out of Langenheim, so he stayed in Dresden, and I think he was doing a lot of workshop stuff out of his home in Dresden, and so he just sort of fired that up again and started making watches. I went there, and you gotta go to that website, and there's one of the things, across the top of the menu. There's this one that is called CAD, and you can download all of these, I guess, CAD, whatever they use. It's like a software that you can make these different watches or watch parts if you have a printer, a 3D printer. Really amazing. I've got a friend who's really good at 3D printing. I think I'm going to download some and send them to him and see if he can what he can do with them. I've really never used CAD. So anyway, for those of you, if any of you do that, take a look at it anyway. They're really cool stuff. Oh wow, okay. HRM, Messina Lab with Raoul Paget's movement, $5,000. That sounds like a fantastic deal. Oh yeah, UG. Okay, I got it. Universal Geneve. Bill, as far as Bill and Ross, that interesting adding those complications as a subline, as possibly slightly stepping up the quality without overdoing. Yeah, the thing of it is, Dom, this is what I would rather see, is sort of like starting rather than, here's what they have. They got an ETA or a Salida movement. Then they've got these incredible ones from Chanel. Like we're not talking like, oh, we'll add a few $100 or a few $1,000 to the price. They're adding a lot to the price. So I think you're right if you're saying that getting them a little higher, a little better, but still affordable. See, people who buy Bell and Ross watches aren't buying them. They like something like I do, like the style from a airplane's instrument panel. And so the same thing happened with Seiko a number of years ago when they went into high horology with it's called the 4L line of watches. They charged more, and boy, they lost all kinds of customers, and they had to sort of revise that idea. Lazarus, I thought CAD was for Canadian dollars. Yeah, probably so, except it costs more than Canadian dollars. HRM. Today you could even 3D print in titanium, steel, or gold. Very cool. Yeah. That's another thing. See, this is where say, okay, we're going to make these things, and we got the money, and we'll get this special 3D printer, and we'll do it all in this, and we'll be able to keep the price down and keep the profits up, and so on and so forth. I don't know what they would do with that, but HRM, your point is a good one. I think this is where I suppose where you get off and on with the handmade thing. You see, what's his face, Roger Smith, out there with a this gold dolly, this hunk of gold pipe is what it looks like, and he puts it through his machine and makes his own gold watches. On the other hand, if you got a 3D printer that can do that, following the smartwatch crisis, a lot of watch manufacturers will disappear, only big groups. John, your point about the smartwatch crisis is probably, I think, is one that is not that recognized. It may be by some, but boy, I tell you, it seems to have hit every single button. You look these days, and including my wife, who got some very nice mechanical watches. All she does is wear her Hermes version of the smartwatch, the Apple smartwatch, and and they're talking about not billions of dollars. There are billions there, but talking about billions of watches that were sold. And I mean, that's a lot of watches. And when we have an Apple store not too far from where we live, there's a mall, and they have an Apple store there. And when a new Apple Watch came out, or a new Apple anything comes out, there'll be a line around the mall. Unbelievable. So I think you're right. It's sort of like I think the answer to that, to the smartwatch, is like, well, we'll do the same thing we did with quartz. We'll just have watches that are prestige watches, and they're sort of like jewelry or something. I don't know how well that'll work, but I think you're absolutely right. Yep, Truman, they own 25% of Kinesi. Thing I like with Chanel is still run by the Wertheimers, who founded with Coco. Lang, for one, seems to flourish even under the Richemont group. All longer flourishing. financially may be flourishing. Creatively, I don't think so. I have a friend who's a German watchmaker, and for a long time, that's all he could talk about. And also, too, you notice that year after year, all Longa was winning grand prizes and other prizes at the GPHC. They're not anymore, and I wonder about that. I wonder how they may be thriving financially because, Richemont probably has some smart, business people, but in fact, I'm sure they do. So I don't know. I think the groups are just a mirror of what's happening in every other industry. Yeah, I mean the centralization. Yeah, you know what? You have two things. Or let me tell you a quick story, and then I'll let you go because I know that a rancher just told me it's frying pan time. Years ago, when I published my first book, this is back in the 1970s. I was working with a company in New York, is in New York City, called Prager, and Prager is sort of a very interesting publishing company. And the publisher, he and I were talking one day, and he said, someday and this is when there was all the same kind of consolidation. All of these companies were being bought up. All of these book companies were being bought up, including Prager. And he said someday what there's going to be is there's going to be like a handful of the major book companies, and then there can be all these little bitty ones. Well, what happened in the 80s was really a surprise because on the one hand he was right, but what happened was suddenly there were all of these little book companies, these little book publishers, and what they had done, what they were able to use, the laser printers that were coming out that could be used for typesetting and all kinds of other things, made it very easy to publish books for small companies. And so there are all these little bitty companies. Today, what we're seeing are really two things as far as the individuals are concerned. You take, for example, Marco Lang watches. He was sort of pushed out by money people. And there was probably a good reason, financially speaking, but horologically, not so much. And Marco Lang became the president of AHCI, the Independent Watchmakers Group. And so you see these things happening. There's almost alive, is that you'll get a compression and then you'll get all these little independents. And I think there's there's what we'll call junk independents. And these are independents who are out to make a quick buck. They figured out that they can put in a cheap movement, they can do this, they don't have to do much of anything else. And they can sell enough watches to make it worthwhile. So, and then there are the ones like Badat and Peterman. The young guys are starting their own company, and that I think is another kind of thing, and they eventually end up with AHCI. But then when you start looking at AHCI, here one of the early members is FP Journe, and now they're owned 25% by Chanel. Now, when FP Journe shuffles off this mortal coil, so to speak, they'll probably take over the whole company. And I think this is what FP Journe wants to some extent, because I guess his kids are not, like Breguet's kids and grandkids and so forth, who are interested in taking over the company. So it'll be interesting things. Micro brands, yeah. Oh, yeah. They always have. They've always sort of been like pop-up brands. The ones that survive, there's some I know of. They do put in like really basic movements, sort of elaborate versions of Salida, and they have good watches though. I mean, they're good watches around it, and they're able to sell them. but take a look at the challenge category in the GPHG, and you see companies like Underdog and some of these other sort of new ones that are very interesting. Anyway, I am over my time limit and getting getting a reminder. Anyway, thank you guys for coming, and we'll be back at 4 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. If anyone, you're all welcome back. Take care, and thank you for your really great comments you guys had today.